do mispronounce. This morning at Starbucks, I gave the name Maria, and then they called out, Mari? Is Mari here? You can't win. Anyway, thank you so much. Hey! I met Professor Larson, Carlton, just right now, but I had been in touch with him on email because I do a lot of research about names and naming, what they do in other countries, and I came across a law review article of all things, an academic treatise on the constitutional limits of naming. And what was especially intriguing about it was that right at the very first page, he mentions people that I know who happen to be sitting right over there, who had a child that they named Lucia, but the state of California would not allow the accent over the I in the official birth registration. And so, tell us about that. First of all, how in the world did you get interested in writing about names?
So it was one of those bizarre things where I just had this flash, gee, I wonder, are there any limits on what you can name your baby? And at the time I didn't have any children, so it didn't, grow out of some dispute with my spouse. It was just interesting, and I talked to a senior colleague who had been the chair of my tenure committee, and he said, that's a really dumb idea. Don't write about it, nobody would care. But the beauty was, by that time I was tenured, and so I didn't really care what you had to say. So I said, I'm going to do this. And it turned out it's been by far the most popular thing I've ever written in terms of generating some sense media interest, and just I get emails from people all around the country who have stories about their names and problems they've had with their states. It's by far the most downloaded thing I've ever written. It's here. I have a dozen or so copies over there on the chair. If anyone wants to take one, feel free to take one. I have tons of them in my office. So
it's fascinating reading. It really is.
As I tried to write it, it is ultimately it's in a legal journal, but it's written for ultimately, written deliberately in a way that non-lawyers can understand. I think and pick up what's going on. And so I started just digging into it, and the more I found it, the weirder and weirder it got. In some states, there's no laws at all. Some states have all kinds of strange restrictions. Other states, have and then sometimes it's in their statute book. Sometimes it's what the desk clerk tells you it is. And to figure it out was really hard. I sent emails. My researcher says to send emails to people all around different states to figure out what their law is. And in some states, they say you can name your baby anything you want. Other states will say no, it has to be a certain length. It can't be too long. They won't let you do that. Other states, like California, say no diacritical marks. You can't have accent marks on the name. Most states will say no obscenity. So you can't use, a dirty word to name your baby. Probably a good idea. English, you can't use numbers some states. So you could name your child 8, for example, if you spelled it out, E-I-P-H-T. But if you want to use the number 8, you can't do that. You wonder, well, why? It's the same thing. Right? Actually, 8 as a numeral is universal, right? Everybody understands that. Of course, reducing it to 8 as an English language is weird. Let's see, what else?
Give us examples of, for example, can you name your child Adolf Hitler?
Well, that's one of the strange things. So that's the story I paired with the story here, which was, you can name your child Adolf Hitler. Right? Every state in the country would say that's fine. And there was a child in New Jersey named Adolf Hitler. That was the name. The parents gave him that. And then it made national news because his dad went to the bakery to get the cake made. We've had cakes are really big. Like, cakes have been big in constitutional law lately. So, but they wanted to say happy birthday Adolf Hitler. And the cakes and shop said, no, we're not going to write happy birthday Adolf Hitler. So that triggered actually part of an investigation into the family. It turned out they had a lot of other issues as well. Not surprisingly, the kids were taken away. So it's actually very strange that you can give your child some truly awful, awful names, and there have been really, really bad ones that people have given us. Some of them are in the article. But that's just fine. No state has that. I actually think we might want to be a little more attentive to that, because certain names truly can be outrageously harmful. The one that comes to mind is the name Toilet Queen. Well, that's just not a good name for a child. And it's very hard to think of a good reason to do something like that to a child. And the child has no ability to counter this, right? Like, this is a name given from one human being to another. The most vulnerable person imaginable, right? Like a newborn baby. And so I think there might be some reasons to look a little more closely at certain bad names. But again, I'm not only convinced that's a good idea because the administrative costs, the likelihood of it being abused, and various other problems. So I think it's a very hard question. But it does bother me in some sense that here in California, if you're filling out a birth certificate, you write Adolf Hitler for your kid's name, they just fine, no problem. But you want to use a traditional Spanish name with a diacritical mark, like Maria, forget it.
I'll say.
Yeah, it'll be tossed back. And we've tried to fix this in the legislature. About 4 years ago, I went and testified in front of the legislature about this. And the Department of Vital Statistics came back and said it'll cost us millions of dollars to fix our computers to do this. Well, that seems very strange, given that I assume Latin American countries do this every day with absolutely no difficulty. How could that be the case? Well, the bill died, finally got through a few years ago, and Jerry Brown vetoed it and said, well, basically we need a, it's expensive, we need a more comprehensive approach to this, whatever. He wasn't ready to do it. So you still cannot get a birth certificate in California with a diacritical mark, despite the fact that we have state parks named with diacritical marks on them. Our very first U.S. Senator was John C. Fremont, who had a diacritical mark on his name. Right?
But you can have an apostrophe like for O'Connor or a hyphen.
Exactly. So it's entirely bogus. Irish names are fine. Right? If you want to put that apostrophe in there and have O'Connor, go for it. But using a Spanish name, forget it. And you mentioned when California became a state, California produced Spanish versions of the laws for a number of years, a separate printed versions of the laws, all had diacritical marks in them because that's how we write Spanish. So the state 160 years ago was fully capable of using the Spanish language in official state documents, and yet we seem unable to do something.
So give us some examples of things people write you about. And then I want to talk about, although it's not a constitutional issue, some of you may have read that Dear Abby got a letter from a parent asking South Asian Indian parents saying, my wife wants to give our child a traditional Indian name and I don't know what to do, I'm worried, what do you think? And her response was, give your children American names so that they can fit in. And there was a huge backlash of stories. Did somebody send you that little article?
No one sent me that one. The types of questions I tend to get, they tend to be mostly the accent marks, the diacritical marks are the main problems, and it's not, of course, just Spanish names. It's, other names as well.
Right, like French names have
French names and Scandinavian names have them, and people often get very frustrated because they can't get their name officially recognized as their legal name. So I think the Dear Abby column was interesting. I don't think it was a very thoughtful response as a knee-jerk thing to say choose an American name. First of all, what's an American name, right? Everybody's name is American name because we're all Americans.
Someone commented that her name is, Dear Abby that's not her name, it's Abby's daughter, but I think her name is Jean, Jeanne, and they said, well, you have a French name yourself.
That said, if you're on the edge between two names and you're sort of equally between the two of them, and one is extraordinarily difficult to spell and pronounce, I can see a reason why you might factor that in picking your children's name. Because it's not just pronunciation, it's actually spelling. And that's one where my name isn't mispronounced, but it's misspelled all the time. Even my own father-in-law misspells my first name. There isn't one, Larson can be spelled with no N or an E-N, and people have cited this article with a misspelled name of mine. And what did I do for my two children? I gave them names that are very easy to misspell, Karina and Ellie, both of which have multiple misspellings. And at the end of the day, I liked the names enough, I was willing to do it, but it was something I did think about.
Well, I would like to give you all an opportunity to ask any questions if you have any. Yes, Louis.
Yeah, did you make the argument, is this like a civil right that you should have a name right to you?
Yeah, so what I argue is that there's essentially sort of two strands of constitutional case law that speak to this. And so one is what we call substantive due process right, where you have certain rights just sort of inherent in society. One of those is the right to name your children. Right? You get to do that, it's not the government. And then the other is a free speech argument. That is, when you're naming a child, that's expressive activity. And so that is speech, subject to First Amendment analysis. And under both of those strands, the government can restrict what you do. But the technical legal terms is subject to strict scrutiny, meaning essentially you got to have a really good reason to do it, right? You know, we can restrict your speech if you're, since we're in a theater, right, falsely shouting fire in a theater. I also wrote a large article about that, by the way. If you want to find it on my webpage. So we can do that because the government has a really good reason why you should do that, because people will die. So typically, a lot of the reasons given for restricting names are not bad, right? The fact that it might cost us some time and money to upgrade our software, to me, is not a really, really good reason. Whereas some other reasons, I think, you know, having some type of length requirement, probably okay. I mean, a 300-character name, you know, I mean, at a certain point, that's just completely administratively infeasible for anybody. It's not community. It doesn't serve good community or function. So, you know, someone who submitted a 300-character name, I think that's fair. Reject that. There does need to be a good reason. But for these other things, not so much. So basically, that's the constitutional argument set forth. And one of the things I was trying to tell the legislature was, look, you fix this yourselves, or I'm going to find someone to sue you. You know, and hopefully get a court.
Any more children?
Get a court ruling. You know, so
you have two wins.
Julian. And I mean, we made choices. I from South America. We made choices to have names that would be, you could pronounce correctly in English and in Spanish. And interesting, Lucia is pretty easy in both, although she gets Lucia and Lucia a lot. My son is Julian or Julian, and he does get the Julian or Julian, which is mispronunciation.
Yes.
But I don't think we're going to sue them.
All right,
They
so
have things in both of their names that are not on their birth certificate.
I should say on the link thing, so when I had my first child, the nurses came in at the hospital and they filled out this form for the birth certificate, and so I did. They came back and said, there's a problem. What's wrong? My name's too long. They have two middle names. So they said, well, we can take the last two letters off of your second middle name. And you can be listed as the father on the birth certificate with that. And part of me is thinking, I want to grab this thing and like, hey, look, you want to get sued over this? But you're so tired, you're just really not thinking. And so finally I said, okay, what if I just use my two initials? And so that's what we did. So on my daughter's birth certificate, her name, she also has two middle names. It's a family thing. And there was enough room for hers to be put on there. But mine, I just have the initials. And that's fine. I haven't sued over that. But part of me is still irritated by it. Because why not? Why couldn't I have my whole name on my own daughter?
now some countries have limits as to what names you can give. Like there's a roster of acceptable names, and anything outside of those names you need to get approval. So it's kind of the whole flip side.
Yeah, exactly. Most countries are very, very rigid about this. Some countries have an approved list, right? And if you're not on the list, you legally cannot use that name for your child. Others, have more of an administrative process where they reject various names. So, for example, you mentioned Portugal, Portuguese. Like, it has to be an authentically Portuguese name. Argentina, it has to be an authentic Spanish name. If you want to name your kid Malcolm in Argentina, they will make it. America is actually one of the most permissive societies when it comes to selecting names.
Yes.
Has anybody done sort of a social power study around naming and laws around naming? Because clearly that's the thread that seems to be running through all of this. This is a way that we can control the conversation about who is a real citizen or a real member of society or a better member and who's not.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone's squarely done that, and in some ways, I suspect some of this is not even that it's deliberate, it's just almost indifference, right? It's just, you just didn't even think, it didn't occur to you. Like when you were setting up, oh, let's have a state database to allow diagnostic words, right? It didn't occur to someone. So I think there's just a lot of it is not necessarily malicious, but just thoughtlessness.
But then when you bring it up, they get malicious about it.
Yeah, when you have, they don't seem to really do a whole lot about it.
But in response to that, when there are big power differentials, it is often the case that people in power tell the powerless what you can be named. And you probably recall that in the TV show and then the movie Roots, Kunta Kinte was stripped of his name. He was called Toby, and he was beat to an inch of his life because he would refuse to say his name was Toby. And I saw a playwright do she's a solo performer, she's from Liberia. She talked about when the people in the United States went to Liberia to set up their own society there, they wanted the natives to take English names. So it's like once you come into power, you tend to repeat what's been done to you. Yes, you have a question or comment?
Oh, well, both. I read a study recently that some sociologists had looked at names that have been sort of categorized as typically African American, like plus or stuff like that, and found that there was discrimination. My question was, I happen to be an attorney for CalOSHA, and we deal with a lot of injured workers who are immigrants from Latin America. And I know I also speak Spanish, and I know that in different parts of Latin America, you use your father's name or your mother's name, and sometimes it's reversed, and it creates a huge amount of confusion about what is somebody's real last name, not so much the first name, the last name. And I don't know if there's any respectful or sensible way of dealing with that. Because I know it's done differently here and in other countries. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's okay. It's not the first bit of that.
What people do is they use a hyphen. So Lopez is my middle name, but it's really my last name, and Hernandez is last in line, but it's really my mother's name. So Lopez hyphen Hernandez. So in my line of work, every week I'm a judge in a
Confess, she's a judge.
I confess that, but I can't tell the story otherwise. But people come in to put in the, talk about marks. They have to put in the hyphen, or else nobody will recognize who they are. So they're always changing their name to officially add a hyphen to their name. But the strangest story is a woman who, her name was Mary Garcia. She wanted to change her name to Mary Garcia, and I thought someone had made an error. She didn't fill out the form right. And I said, did you make an error? And she said, no, I have to prove that I'm Mary Garcia. They won't believe that I'm Mary Garcia unless I get a court order. And these are just different governmental agencies now that are so, irrational that if I go in and say, I'm Susan Matcham, I want to apply for something, we don't believe you. You better go to court and get an order and say that you're Susan Matcham. And that is not infrequent, apparently. Very strange.
I have the most wonderful friends who are judges and other professions too, who tell me how hard they work at getting the names right of the people who appear before them. And that, I think that's just so wonderful. It's how we show respect to another human being. Yes?
I guess I think it's an interesting question about the diacritical marks, because I was shocked to find that you couldn't name somebody with your typical diacritical mark, an accent over the regular accent over the E or something. But I started thinking about it, of course, in the computer codes, the same computer codes that allow you to add an accent over the E or an umlaut over an O are the same computer codes that let you do Chinese characters or Derangari characters, or to the extreme, emojis. And I probably don't think we want to have people allowed, maybe we do, want to have people allowed to name themselves, winky face with smile or something. But I wonder, but it does seem to me that there's a continuum rather than an easy decision to make here. And I was just wondering what you thought about that.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. There's a continuum. I mean, I do think, the emojis, the symbols, I talked about that a little bit in the article, the artist formerly known as Prince. That symbol was not a useful name because everybody calls him the artist formerly known as Prince because the symbol totally failed to have any sort of communicative function. So most states say you can't use a symbol. I think that's perfectly fine. And so you have to draw the line somewhere, right? So we've got, on the one hand, you can say, well, we got the 26 characters of the English, doing the Roman alphabet, draw the line there, and then nothing else. Then you could say, well, those characters with diacritical marks, then you could shift into, say Greek letters or Cyrillic or Chinese or Arabic, whatever, on the other end. So I would draw the line after the diacritical marks and before all those other languages. I think it's perfectly fair for the United States to say, your name has to be in a form that it is reproducible, right? And there needs to be at least some way. And in a pinch, you can reproduce the name without the diacritical mark if you absolutely had to. Obviously, this is not ideal to do so, but if you had to, you could. Whereas with other, say Cyrillic characters, you just can't. And I realize that's not necessarily theoretically precise, but it's just, I think, just a practical way to work it. That is, you can at least draw the line a little bit closer to giving people more freedom of expression without necessarily going all the way down to the emojis.
Question over there and then here.
I have a comment. 11 years ago, I decided to change my name to just having a first name, and that was really intentional, not to have that surname. And it's just a nightmare. Now I have a passport with one name, but it's a surname, and a driver's license with one name, but it's a surname. And I pursued it with the state of California, with the DMV. And it was kind of that same thing. Well, our software is only set up to, they don't care if you have a first name or not, but you damn well better have a last name. And for me, it really represented an amount of personal sovereignty. I come from the background of abuse. I don't want to be tied to my family of origin. And I really don't feel supported. So in life, when I get mail or whatever, it's either Artemis, or right now I have a contract with someone, so when I get their little auto email, it's, hello, nun Artemis. So, just a little tidbit there. People only have one name.
I wonder what Madonna.
I know.
Yes.
This is just an observation, not really a criticism, but people's super sensitivity around names seems to parallel the social movement. When my parents, who were born in Europe, came to this country, they had my father had his family name changed when he entered Ellis Island, as did many other immigrants. The guy at the desk couldn't pronounce the name, and he just handed out brand new names. And I don't recall my father ever objecting to that. And in fact, back in the day when I was a younger person than I am now, it spoke to assimilation rather than multiculturalism. You wanted to have a name that helped you blend into your society and grease the wheels of interaction more easily, whereas now people are making much more of a deal about their ethnicity and wanting to trumpet that rather than ease the possible confrontations by fitting in more easily.
I have two comments. One of them first is, it's actually not the case that most name changes occurred at Ellis Island. There was a huge number of people who spoke the languages of the incoming immigrants. The way names got changed, and this is, if you do genealogical research, it is supported. I've done a lot of research, and this is how I learned about it. People's names got changed when you took your kid to enroll it in school.
Yes. Yeah.
When you went to look for a job at the Union Hall. Wazinski, you're now Williams. Your name's too hard, right? So I think it's important to know that is a myth. Sometimes it did change,
No,
and sometimes
most people.
and sometimes it changed. But I hear that repeated so much. So the challenge for people who can't blend in because of our physical appearance, we have a whole different challenge. I could call myself Mary Williams, but I'm still identifiable as someone who isn't Irish, or, I mean, I guess I could pass for Italian or Greek, but there also has been a greater sense of celebration in our cultures and who we are, and a reluctance of people to give up. You can be a real good American without having to feel you are assimilated.
But now, in your case, you were, well, are American, as were your parents and grandparents and however far back it goes. So you're American, and yet you've chosen to pronounce your name in the Spanish way, not the, quote, American way, which is a personal choice. It seems to me slightly defiant.
It's my name. What's your name?
Well, I mean, I can pronounce my name any number of ways. It could be Beatriz, Beatrice. I mean, I can spell my nickname about 4 or 5 different ways. I just don't care.
But you probably say your name the way your parents said it.
They always just nicknamed me. I can't recall them ever saying my full name.
See, you know, when I wrote this play, the thing is, it isn't about being Chicana. Yes, I'm very proud of my culture and my background, but it's kind of a universal theme. You know, everybody has a name. I've met people whose name is, a person whose name is Alexander. If you call him Alex and he tells you it's Alexander, and I insist on calling him Alex, it's like, well, that's not my name, right? So it is a personal choice, but it defines who we are, and we get to decide. And you know, the reason I name my play, Why Would I Mispronounce My Own Name, is because I have no control over whether somebody wants to call me Irma Herrera or not. That's on them, but why would I mispronounce my own name, right?
And so one change in naming is now with the internet, right? People really want to have a distinctive name because you can Google that name. So when you're thinking about a name for your child, and people I think do that on the expectation that what is Google ultimately about the child would be positive, right? It's potentially negative. But I think that the internet, names where people would think, oh, okay, this is like a really neat, interesting new name, and then they Google and discover a zillion people have it. I always sometimes joke, one of my friends has a baby and they named their kid their name, and it's like, oh, well, do you know about that famous serial killer who had the same name? And they go, oh no, man, I just messed with it. Right, but you really should Google, you do need to Google. Google the name you're thinking of giving your kid before you pick it.
Yes, a couple more questions, and then I think we could talk for hours, but there's cake waiting at the yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much for the beautiful show. It really informed and broadened my perspective. I was sitting here thinking while everyone was talking. I want to share that with you just for a second. My name, Joshua Absalom Hatam, is Persian. And when I was a little boy, my father was never around. But when I was a little boy, the teacher asked, because we moved to 22 schools, what is that? What name is that? And I said, oh, it's Middle Eastern. And then that didn't go well in the school I was at the time. I was up in Sonora in the foothills. And so after that, I never answered that question again. And then instead of saying Hatam, I always said Hatam. And then I would tell people what my middle name was. So that's just one thing. And so that's why I would mispronounce my own name. That's why I'm ashamed that other people still don't. As a child, children can be very cruel. And as being formerly incarcerated, when you Google my name, some crazy stuff comes up. So now that's another issue. And then last but not least, I guess it's more of a common question. And last but not least, it doesn't matter. I'm an AA. So now that's another reason why I said now Joshua. And I go, this name thing, it's just, I never really thought about it. What a beautiful topic, and I just want to thank you.
Thank you so much. And Joshua is a very talented storyteller. So look him up. Or maybe not, but check Solo Sundays and other places because he's going to be big in the show. Yes.
I just wanted to bounce off the comment that it was, I think, seemed a little defiant was the word used to insist on being Irma instead of just going with the flow and being Irma. And in the past, many people from many countries went with the flow and just got called whatever. I have trouble with the idea of someone being told that they're defiant because it puts the problem on them. And really, I'm only defiant usually when someone is defining me or telling me who I am or how my name should be said or how I should see the world, and it's not me. And the problem is really not with the people who are defiant and sticking up for their name, their language, their culture, their personhood. It's with people who have problems with someone being who they are and problems with someone saying, no, you're not right this way, you should be this way. And that's not up to the other person to decide for you.
Thank you. Well, I wrote this play to give people a sense of what it's like to be a person of color, growing up in an environment that's giving you all sorts of messages about who you are and how you should be defined. And I defied a lot of expectations in what I've done with my life. And I just want people to think about, because we are all able to change our perceptions and understanding of the world. The closest distance between two people is a story. And stories connect us to other people's lives. And I'm glad for anybody who has a different view to just stop and consider why it's this way for me. One more question. Did I see a hand back there? Yes.
Hi, Gemma. I'm Malia.
Hi, Malia.
I wanted to just make a quick connection to patriarchy and political systems that use naming as one of their tools of controlling and defining us, so we're more manipulable. That's a word. When I was born, my parents, I was the firstborn, and they were very Catholic, and they decided to name me Mary Jo, like Mary and Joseph, but just Mary Jo. And the Monsignor said, absolutely not. I've been up for hours. There is no saint Mary Jo. So it's not in the books. It's not going to happen. And my baptismal record reads Mary Josephine, Teresa McLaughlin. So my parents were kind of sheep at that time. They got more outspoken later, but they said, we'll just call her Mary Jo. No one needs to know. But officially, I'm Mary Josephine, a name my parents did not want for me. And secondly, a friend who was researching a history of early feminism said that when women marry, they disappear because they give their name away. And he was trying to track women who were powerful, progressive, socially connected people who literally couldn't find them except on tombstones in Boston and Philadelphia. So the naming thing is really important, and it touched me.
Thank you, Malia. It's
and
nice
the voter
to see you.
rolls. My God, what's happening with voting? God forbid you have a name like John Brown or because they're gunning for anyone who doesn't look like they're going to vote the right way.
The right way, the nice double entendre.
Yeah.
The one way to see the patriarchy, the handful of states, primarily I think Louisiana, Tennessee, still guarantee fathers the right to have their last name as the baby's name. And there's no equivalent guarantee on why to use the mother's surname. And those restrictions have been upheld actually side by one. Which I think is completely ludicrous. Why should you be allowed to make up a new surname if you want to use a mother's surname or whatever?
So this has been a fascinating conversation. I want to thank I want to say one more thing. He's hiding behind, I want to recognize Bruce Packman over there, who's been such a friend to me as a solo performer, and my play used to have a different name, and one day he said, are you wedded to your play's name? And I said, well, I'm not. He goes, you know, your play doesn't tell me what it's really about. So think about whether a different name. And so we were chatting, and I said, here's the deal, Bruce. If someone else can't say my name, that's on them, but why would I mispronounce my own name? And he said, that's a good title. So thank you, Bruce.